From the World Wrestling Federation, it's Tuesday Night Titans with your host, Vince McMahon. This is Lord Alfred Hayes inviting you to join Vince and his special guests. And now, here is your host, Vince McMahon.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tuesday Night Titans. Indeed, this is a most unusual treatment of the World Wrestling Federation.
Tag team back again.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural podcast, the Tag Team Wrestling Podcast, where we'll be covering WWE Network material. And right now we're focusing on WWF Tuesday Night Titans from May 29th, 1984. Plan on riding this series out until we can't no more. What's on the network is pretty much 43 episodes, give or take, and we'll be going through those first. I'm your host, John Burke, and your other host is
Jeff Jones.
A little bit of background about ourselves, why we decided to do this. I originally got into wrestling when I watched Hogan versus Andre the Giant. It was a main event Friday night, February 5th, 1988. I was watching a VHS tape that my dad taped for me to watch. Got hooked on it. The match was Hogan versus Andre for the title. Andre wins the title, and only takes about a couple of seconds before he hands it over to $1 Million Man, making him the champion. But hold up, there's a catch. They had a dusty finish, and that was Hogan kicked out at 2, but the ref didn't see it. We later find out in the later of the match that Dave Hebner, the scheduled referee, was not actually the referee that did the count. I'm guessing due to age at the time, I don't recall exactly, that they've never acknowledged that Dave and Earl were twins. So Dave Hebner was supposed to be the referee, and out comes Earl Hebner, and it shocks Hogan, and they go into a big old hissy fit over it. And it ends up that they have WrestleMania 4, where the title's on the line through a tournament. So this is pretty much the setup for WrestleMania 4. That was my first recollection of watching wrestling and kind of getting hooked. Later on, I'd go back and watch WrestleMania 3 and 2 and 1 and try to get caught up on the pay-per-view side, at least, since there wasn't that much up to that point. What about you, Jeff? What got you hooked to the squared circle?
It was seeing 4 men in the electrified Thunderdome. It was Ric Flair and Sting versus the Great Muta and Terry Funk. Now, I didn't know too much of Terry Funk as I do now, as he is the hardcore legend. I knew Ric Flair, and Sting, face paint, and the Stinger Splash. And what really intrigued me more out of all 4 was the Great Muta, his presence, his face paint, the mist that he had, the ultimate. The match was in the electrified Thunderdome. This is no disqualifications. There's no time limits. And it's about time there was no time limits, because that was a big factor for those matches back then. So that was a big win for me.
It comes up in this episode where they have a time limit draw for one of the matches. So that will come into play for this podcast.
And I have to say, they need to do more electrified Thunderdome matches for sure, especially one like this. No qualification, there's no time limits. The only way to win is if somebody throws a towel in, and at this time it was Gary Hart and Ole Anderson. The only way the match would stop if they threw the towel in, saying they couldn't take no more.
Do you think they would actually call it the Thunderdome nowadays with all this copyright stuff? It'd probably have to rename it something else. It'd be like, nah, that's Mad Max. Yeah, you can't have that name.
Yeah, it'd be something electrified elimination
chamber match. I'd watch that next February.
I wouldn't mind seeing John Cena electrified. But anyways, I digress. I do remember it because there was a fire at the very start of the match before they got in. They got the cage set, they got the electricity flowing, and it's not the voltage, it's wattage. Remember, kids. And sure enough, there was a fire right above Buddha. And I remember seeing Tay-Chan with the fire extinguisher running around the ring to attempt to put the fire out. And the Great Muta, the spider monkey he is, just climbed up like it was nothing to the ring and used his mist to put out the fire. A little evil to help a little good, because I think he was saving it for Ric Flair or Sting, but instead the fire got it.
WCW main event that does not go off as planned. That never happened.
That was actually the NWA. It was 89. And after that, I was hooked, definitely. And then 1990, Thanksgiving, there was a pay-per-view on Thanksgiving, which was kind of odd.
Good old days.
And I remember watching Survivor Series, 1990, and there was a big egg that kept rocking back and forth with a little crack. And I didn't know what was in there. Nobody else knew what was in there. Mean Gene sure as hell didn't know what was in there, as much excited as he got talking about it, obviously. Finally, toward the end of the segment, something finally popped out of the egg. Hector Guerrero in a turkey outfit.
I think that was Hector's only stint in the WWF, too. I don't think he ever wrestled under anything else.
Hell, if I had to wrestle that egg, I would too. That'd be it for me. Gobbledygooker. That was it.
What the WWF would like for you to remember that pay-per-view for is the debut of The Undertaker.
Yes, Undertaker.
Yeah.
Yes. I have to say that I was an avid pay-per-view watcher thanks to my dad's illegal, descrambler of free signal that was sent down from the heavens.
Yes, I can relate. Stepdad was the same party. We had cable instead of satellite, but we also owned a descrambler, and the first pay-per-view I ever watched from start to finish was WrestleMania 6 with Hulk Hogan versus the Ultimate Warrior in the Sky Dome, title for title. That was, I think, the only time that one person held both titles back then, until they had a little tournament later on to get rid of the Intercontinental title.
Was that one of the Ultimate Warrior's mini marathon runs to the ring?
That was one of his super high energy, blown up after the first 5 seconds because of his long runs to the ring. Yep. By the end of the match, he might as well not have been wearing face paint because none covered his face.
They didn't have the wellness policy back then, though, did they?
I think wellness just mean, how you doing? Well, I'm doing pretty good. And that was about it. That was the policy.
How you doing? I'm doing well. Good.
Yeah.
Get out there, get ready to run.
Yep, exactly. Now would probably be a good time to introduce the third member that we have on our podcast here.
Hello listeners, I am Lord Bosley from the other side of the pond. I will be your historian, knowledge resource and game show host for the podcast. I started observing wrestling when these gaffers voluntold me to. Now I feel spawny to be a part of this podcast. Cheers.
Best thing about Bosley is he's pretty cheap. You don't have to pay him that much as an intern for the show.
We appreciate his cooperation with us, and he can bring a lot of knowledge to the podcast for not a lot of money. So he's a great deal.
If he acts out of line, we might have their applicants try to fill in his place if we ever need to get rid of him because he starts asking for money.
Keep those resumes ready.
Tuesday Night Titan history. Pretty much it aired on, like we said, May 29th, 1984. Vince's dad, Vince J. McMahon, passed away at 69 in North Miami on May 27th of this year after a long battle with pancreatic cancer. Pretty sure that this was probably taped in April, March, or maybe even before then. So I don't think they went to air 2 days after his dad passed away. The summary for the show, the format basically for the show is a WWF produced talk show. It was patterned off the Tonight Show. Don't think the current day or even previous, think way back when, starring Johnny Carson. They had Lord Alfred Hayes on there for the Ed McMahon part of the Johnny Carson type talk show. The program featured wrestlers, kayfabe or in character, so they weren't breaking any fourth walls down or anything like that. Didn't see the guys enter the ring, you just automatically cut. The guys have been wrestling for a while and you get the last 3-4 minutes of the match until the bell rang. The show was taped in Video One facilities in Owings Mill, Maryland. Shout out to Owings Mills. I worked there for 2 years. Owens Mills, not Video One. I'm sure it was long gone by the time I got there in 2003. It ran from May 29th, 1984 to September 24th, 1986. It was airing on the USA Network. There was a total of 93 episodes for the show. What's currently on your WWE Network right now is May 29th through August 2nd, 1985. About 43 episodes. These were originally put up there when the network first aired, so we're not sure if they're going to add any more to it, but seeing how that was 2 years ago, it's not looking good that they probably will, but there is stuff out there on YouTube, so we'll go ahead and start doing those if we get past August 2nd and nothing's out there. The missing one is episode 31 from April 26, 1985, and that also is out there on YouTube.
Which you can go to our Facebook, facebook.com/The Tag Team Podcast, and I think Mr. Bosley can do a little work and put some links out there for you listeners, and you guys can enjoy and sit back, and whenever we put the podcast out for it, you can review with us, give us your opinions, submit a comment, and let us know what you think about it.
We'll also try to put out Jeff's first match, the Thunderdome, and I'll put out my first match, Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant, out there. The YouTube links out to there if anyone cares to watch them, critique them.
I wasn't in the match personally.
I was the fourth Hefner.
So be sure to critique the fourth Hefner.
What do you remember about May 1984 as far as the timeline? Well, set the scene for us, if you will.
1984 in May. The Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom was released on May 23rd of 1984. Good old Harrison Ford in the whip. I love it. President Ronald Reagan. He was current president.
Reaganomics.
Average household income was right around $21,599.
More than I make now.
And gas was $1.10 a gallon.
Probably the lowest it'll probably ever be.
We'll never see do that again. Also, a little pro wrestling history. In 1984, Hulk Hogan won his first ever WWF Heavyweight Championship against the Iron Sheik. And that, my friend, started the Hulkamania era. Take your vitamins, say your prayers, brother. He was actually a fill-in for Bob Backlund. He was a last-minute replacement. He was supposed to originally fight the Iron Sheik, but Hogan became the first man to ever escape the Sheik finishing move, Camel Clutch. Also, Rusev's move.
Copycatter. You think he went to Iran to learn that?
You know, I think he may have trained over in Iran. It's Bulgaria. Pretty close. I think so.
I'm not sure if the Sheik can fly right now. Anyway, back then they didn't have just one or two companies and a bunch of independents. They had territories. For territories, we're going to try to cover about 2 a podcast. And with this first podcast, we're going to focus on St. Louis and Minnesota. Let's talk some territories.
Let's talk May 1984 timeline with territories.
Wrestling territories. And for you youngsters out there, wrestling territories is something that may be foreign to you, but at one time in the United States alone, there were 25 or 30 wrestling territories that were headquartered around the country, starting in Portland and Seattle, down to San Francisco and Los Angeles, starting back east in Arizona, coming into Oklahoma. Texas had 4 territories, and these territories would run their weekly towns and have their own television program in their market. So if you were in Dallas, you only saw at that point in time the Dallas television. It was before the days of cable TV and the national overlay.
The lay of the territories, May 1984. The St. Louis Territory. The biggest war on territory right now is over St. Louis, where Vince McMahon alternates shows with promoters Bob Geigel from NWA Central States Promotion and Vern Gagne from American Wrestling Association. The duo from both sides are pulling out all the stops and typically selling out every week. One week you will get Ric Flair versus Bruiser Brody. The next week Hulk Hogan versus Big John Studd. The WWF product at this time was pretty crappy. The wild card in the whole thing is promoter Fritz von Erich, world-class championship wrestling, because his WCCW show is the most popular in the city and both sides are trying to work with him and bring in his sons the Von Erichs. The other wild card is former 2-time NWA president Sam Muchnick and former promoter of the St. Louis Wrestling Club, who had retired in 1982, and the St. Louis Wrestling Club was then purchased by Bob Geigel and others. Geigel also owned Central States Wrestling. Geigel found himself in competition with Muchnick's former announcer and general manager Larry Matisek, who felt that Geigel and Harley Race's booking strategy did not fit the town, and ran an opposing promotion. The former announcer/general manager and KPLR director would both ink deals with Vince McMahon a year prior in 1983, giving the WWF a foothold in the St. Louis area. Muchnick, who apparently sees what a bad job that Geigel is doing with the territory and now wants to return. This would put Vince at an advantage because Muchnick's protege, Larry Matisek, is a Vince team member.
Thank you, Lord Bosley, for that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Next territory we want to cover is Minnesota, where Vince can't get on TV if he paid his way in. The AWA was so strong. But that eventually would change, but not in May of 84. Some of the AWA's other top talent, including announcer Mean Gene Okerlund, David Schultz, jumped to the WWF, as the AWA would require talent to place a 6-week notice upon leaving the company for booking and syndication-based reasons. Most of the talent reported told Gagne that McMahon offered them more money not to work out their notices and previously scheduled date appearances, but McMahon disputes that even today.
Yeah, there is a few AWA talent on this first episode of Tuesday Night Titans. You got David Schultz, of course. Mean Gene is on here. He's calling some matches along with doing an interview. Adrian Adonis is on here for a match. And more talent to follow, but yeah, right now those are at least 3 of the ones that came over from the AWA during this episode. Some of the media dirt that was happening around this time was also centered around AWA. A newspaper article came out about the arrest of Ken Patera and Mr. Saito after a drug-fueled brawl at a McDonald's, which I'm sure all of us can relate to. On the night of April 6, 1984, Ken Patera and Mr. Saito went to a McDonald's in Washita, Wisconsin, and were denied service by the McDonald's employees. Ken became incensed and hurled a 30-pound rock through the window of the fast food establishment. Patera and Saito then returned to their hotel next door. Typical, after you throw rocks through McDonald's, you just want to go home. And 2 police officers arrived at the hotel to question the wrestlers. Patera and Saito resisted arrest. Doesn't sound like the wrestlers I know that are on drugs. And attacked the police officers, one of whom was a 19-year-old female. That's probably what done them, man. If it was 2 guys, maybe they wouldn't have got charged as much.
You know, I think it's the boulder that really set off this change of events. Unfortunately,
Come on McDonald's, that's just Tuesday.
It is your, you know, it is da-da-da-da-da, you know, I don't understand.
The female police officer received several broken teeth and a ruptured appendix, while her male counterpart suffered a broken leg. Patera and Saito were working stiff. They eventually, subdued by the police officers, were taken to jail. With all the bad press this incident received, it was time for Patera and Saito to leave the AWA. So that was basically their last stench there. Ken and Jerry Bagwell were AWA champions at the time. They dropped the titles to the Crusher and Von Roski on May 6, 1984. And Patera left the AWA for the aforementioned WWF soon afterwards, because Vince will take anybody. Several months later, around June 1985, Patera and Saito were sent to jail and ended up serving 18 whole months in the slammer for that little incident at McDonald's.
Well, I guess they got 18 months for working stiff, not as much as hurling a boulder through the McDonald's window, I guess.
I'm sure Vince did appreciate them not going out of character, though, throughout that whole thing.
Definitely. And, you know, I do like the fact that at least they dropped the belts. Unlike somebody we know, we're not going to mention names, that refused to drop the belt or they left.
I'm sure Vern probably could have just wrote them out saying, and they died. Probably get away with it back then until WWF became more mainstream, at least.
Very true, very true.
So this first episode out there with this territory talk, there's other links out there on our Facebook page that we'll get Lord Bosley to put up for you. There's a good one for Greg Gagne, Vern's son, that shoots on Pro Wrestling USA, the War of '84, his feelings on Vince and Vince's buyout of other people and stations at the time. That's an interesting, about a 10-minute clip or so. There's an interesting program on the WWE Network, Legends of Wrestling, the territories, that covers basically the wrestler's perspective of what it was like to work in the territories back then. And then there's also a link out there. It's a great documentary. It's super long though, so set aside some time to watch it. WCW territory. It's Heroes of World Class, the story of the Von Erichs and the triumphant and tragedy of World Class Championship Wrestling. I like it better than the one that WWE came out with. It did have some down points where they had some interviews that were outside. It was windy and you can't hear the wrestlers as good as if they would have done it inside or just dubbed over it later on and put the audio through a studio mic or something of that nature. That's the only downside of that one, but overall I like that documentary better than the one that came out by the WWE.
I think a little fresh air, you know, never killed nobody.
No, it's just kind of annoying when you're trying to hear a guy and you just hear and all that stuff when you're trying to listen to what he's saying.
It may have killed the interview. It never kills nobody.
Actually, I think it was Gary Hart, so I technically he did die. But not from that. So recapping the inaugural episode of Tuesday Night Titans. It did air on the 29th of May, and for some unknown reason, it didn't pick back up to 2 weeks later. So right off the bat, I thought that was unusual and probably made it hard to get viewers to come back in 2 weeks, unless maybe they were doing less back in '84. It's hard to say. This is our first episode, and join us again in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It's not even a tease. It's horrible. Like, are they coming back?
Yeah, it's like, oh, I guess that show sucked. It's not back this Tuesday.
I guess I'll turn on Johnny Carson.
There you go. Something else that I noticed when it first started up, it was only a minute and 30 seconds in, and they go to commercial. So if you were flipping through channels and didn't make it up to USA Network by that minute and 30, you wouldn't really know what you were watching until it came back from commercial. I did the theme that I played in the beginning of our podcasts. They did a 30-second spiel, and then they went right to commercial. So I thought that was kind of unusual for at least today's television standards.
Definitely strange. But it did keep you in suspense, I guess.
Yeah, between that, Vince McMahon comparing Lord Alfred Hayes to Hamidi Ahmed, which I had to look up because it was not discussed in my history class. I later found out he's basically a version of Hitler for Africa, so that was an interesting icebreaker to introduce your co-host, though. So I thought that was kind of amusing. Vince humor for sure.
And Lord Alfred is the least threatening person on the whole stage.
Yeah, definitely. He's supporting his tuxedo, I guess, from the late 70s, if I had to date it. It just kind of looks a little bit out of date even for 84. So jumping right into their format there, they introduce themselves, and then our count starts. Would you like to touch on what the count is for this episode? What the word of the day is sponsored by this episode?
Word of the day, ladies and gentlemen, I concur. Now, if you have some really good liquor in a shot glass and you watch this episode, every time you hear I concur, take a shot. If you're not buzzed by the end of the show, listen to this podcast. When you hear I concur, take a shot.
Yeah, the concur count was up to at least 5 that I counted, and I think most of those came within the first 16 minutes. It's like the word for their episode that they just learned before going on air. They couldn't say I agree. It was always concurred. There was another, I concur with your concurration. There was another count that was going on, but we'll get on to that one a little bit later. The first match that they joined in progress was Paul Orndorff versus Brian Blair. This was before he was a member of the Killer Bees. He's a little bit more famous for that. And basically the conclusion of the match was Orndorff handful of tights, and he gets the 3 count in typical heel fashion. For commentary, it was Vince McMahon and Mean Gene, which seems to be an ongoing team that did most of these matches. Occasionally they switched it up, but these house shows that they were filming on was Vince and Mean Gene.
One thing I noticed when I was watching the match myself is you don't see a lot of the face down arm lock submissions and then having the heel drive the knee into the back of the arm, kind of slowing the pace down a little bit. Today's wrestling, it seems like it's more really fast paced, I guess because everybody has ADD and can't sit still longer than 3 seconds. But I like the way how they really told a story with that match. You could tell Orndorff didn't like him, man. A lot of his moves, especially the outside of the ring moves, were really savage compared to today's standard. There was a lot of emotion put into the knees, drove into Mr. Blair's head as Orndorff knocked him off of the apron.
And that's because wrestling was real back then.
Definitely. And I liked at the end, granted, Orndorff did start pulling the tights as the referee was making sure that he had a handful before he slid up to look at the shoulders of Mr. Blair. I do like at the end, once the ring announcer come in the ring and the microphone dropped down, that Blair realized, oh, I lost, and started chasing Orndorff around the ring, and he got the hell out of the ring pretty quick, which is a little comedic. I did enjoy that personally. You don't see a lot of that, chasing around the ring, the good guys and the bad guys kind of chasing back and forth. I did like that.
Yes, that's definitely a throwback to the era. A lot of stuff back then, they work over one body part or focus in on one area, and just a lot of holes and focusing in on the leg or the arm or something of that nature. It's always fun to watch some of the old stuff just to see how the style is different for today's matches that were shown on TV nowadays.
I did enjoy the match overall, though. Got to see a different side of Orndorff. I liked it. It was a good match for the 5 minutes that was there.
Yeah, Paul Orndorff kind of got his break, too. You were talking earlier about Hulk Hogan getting his break by Bob Backlund. And Orndorff kind of got his break, too, by the guy next on the show, and that was David, Dr. D, as they call him, David Schultz. And this isn't the Olympic wrestler from Foxcatcher. This is the wrestler that is famous for 2020 incident that we'll cover later on in a future podcast. But this episode, Dr. D was the star of the episode, his interview with Mean Gene. And I'll let you discuss some of the highlights from that interview. And Dr. D will definitely be a future star on this podcast, as his interview and other things that they showed on this episode will come into play with a nice soundboard.
Oh, most definitely. The interview was absolutely hilarious from beginning to end when he talked about his face on Time magazine, which I couldn't tell if it was an actual Time magazine or not. And,
like a wrestling magazine to me. It looked like Vince's wrestling. I think that this time the first WWF magazine came out, but I could be wrong on that. It might have been a Pro Wrestling Illustrated or something, but definitely not a Times or Rolling Stone magazine.
Or not. I liked it how Mean Gene was trying to hold it for the camera, and Dr. D kept pulling away, then eventually gave it to him and told him, I'll sign it later for you.
A very classic clip from that.
You can have it. You can keep it. I'll autograph it for you later on.
Love it.
Oh yes, yes. I love his whole personification. I love his character. How it's great. You know, the Stone Cold. I think he's been referred to of that era.
Yeah, he's from Tennessee, but that accent and just a little. If you close your eyes, you could kind of picture Stone Cold doing the same kind of promo. Probably a little bit better on the mic. I would say Schultz isn't bad. There's definitely a lot of people worse. He wasn't up to par with the next segment that they ran on him. You could tell it was his first time doing a vignette type deal.
I have seen some promos, and I think I'll link them to our Facebook, facebook.com/The Tag Team Podcast, of interviews and promos that Dr. D would have, and Mean Gene would just burst laughing out, and they had to pan the camera away from Mean Gene and just focus on Dr. D's face till Mean Gene could pull it together. It was great. One of my other favorites, referring back to the interview, I believe it was time to cut Dr. D off. He was going on with his usual, I'll slap my mama.
If my mama stood here and talked to me bad, I'd slap her.
Exactly. I'll beat my wife. Very, very, very violent. And about that time, I think Mean Gene was trying to give hey, it's time to cut the promo. He was in the middle of talking about his ladies, and he got interrupted.
What do you want? You keep touching my leg.
And I have my own theories on this. I think the beating women segment probably wasn't going as well in the talking about it versus maybe on paper as they thought. So Mean Gene had to cut that pretty quick. One of the better portions of the episode that I got a kick out of.
Yeah, they started talking about the beatings and probably, let's go, come on. Not being a part of the production team, I'm still guessing when Mean Gene touches your leg, it means wrap it up or we're done. But apparently Dr. D, David Schultz, did get that message. And just in the middle of the program, middle of the interview, doesn't break character or anything.
What do you want? You keep touching my leg.
Classic. Today that would be edited out, but back then, at the time, let's just roll with it on our first episode.
It was great. He did an awesome job staying in character.
From there, they go to a David Schultz match, and he's facing Billy Travis. Apparently, Billy Travis wrestled Mid-South and is known for his antics there, and he has some stuff out there on YouTube. I didn't dig into Billy Travis too much. Vince and Mean Gene were on commentary again, and since Billy Travis was not as big of a push as David Schultz gets the win. And the interesting thing about this win was Vince's call of the finish as he did. He calls it a devastating maneuver with a spin in air. And as Jeff pointed out to me, because I didn't catch it the first time, he doesn't really spin. His elbow maybe goes in at 45 degrees, and that's about the spin of the finisher there.
I just actually had to replay the video to make sure I didn't miss the spin.
Did you blink?
I trusted Vince McMahon, you see, on commentary. I thought he was guiding me. Not even close. not even spin. Maybe a 45 degree, like you say, maybe.
Yeah, the elbow was at his eye level, and then he drops it down to his opponent's sternum. That's about the only spinning.
Which he has been known to do, to crush the sternum and sometimes go up above the neck to the throat. The devastating maneuver.
Very insightful commentary there, Vince. Yes. So after that, we have the mysterious noise. Jeff didn't catch it. I caught it probably on my second watch through of the show. It happens about the 22:04 mark. It's just some weird inaudible noise. Vince continues to talk and then kind of smiles as they fade out. Like, I don't know if someone farted or what, but it was definitely on there. I listened to it on the network, and then I listened to it off YouTube, and then 22:04, both copies, they had some kind of inaudible noise that just happened while Vince was talking. So I thought that was interesting and kind of, I don't know, hard to catch if you're not listening for it.
Yes,
From there,
I definitely missed that, and I'm sorry that I missed it, because it must have been, I see the smirk, I just couldn't get the noise. He got me on that one. I'll have to go back and try to watch it.
From there, they go on to Dr. D, his home life. Got to go to his house and see that he's a great guy outside the ring. He's just misunderstood. So they go to his ranch, house, whatever you want to call it, in Tennessee to see what his home life. First thing they show is a cow and it moves, and Vince is quick to inform us that that isn't Dr. D. They go inside of his house. It's basically, think of like a Cribs type deal, except they want to show Dr. D's personality, if you will, along with a short glimpse of the inside of his house.
And he made it a point to make sure that everybody knew that he built that house with his own bare hands and no help.
Yeah, he
don't like nobody.
He had a lot of interesting comments about himself. I guess he was going for his prestige, that he's been all around the world and stayed at many hotels. And
I rode the Concorde. and put in to go in the space shuttle.
Now, I'm not sure if he could put in to go on the space shuttle in 1984, as I've never seen any civilians taken up after the teacher incident with the Challenger, and I'm pretty sure they didn't do anything prior to that because of the big deal they made with the Challenger before she went up.
Are you calling me a liar?
So I'm going to have to call BS on that. Sorry, Dave.
I'm not brave enough to do that. I'm glad you are.
He gives his promo, and it seems like he's trying to remember his talking points, and this, to me, it made him seem like he's never done a vignette before, which, I mean, I couldn't do it either, so I'm not harping on the guy. It's just, you could tell it was something new to him. He was talking, oh yeah, and then, but back to this, and he would just cut back to a different subject, because he remembered, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be saying this, or focusing on this, and not this so much. So why they didn't edit all that, or do a couple of takes, or maybe they did do a couple of takes, and that was the best one. I'm not really sure, but it was just interesting just to see him kind of go from subject to subject and go back and forth on occasions. Looked very scripted, if you would.
I was rather impressed with the pizza and chicken that the wife had, spent all that time making, that she didn't know that was coming over, apparently.
Apparently, when she makes pizza, she just makes 2 slices, but when she makes chicken, she makes a lot of chicken. Mm-hmm. So I've never had somebody just make 2 slices of pizza before. I guess it's possible. Apparently the kids knew better, though. They've had her pizza and her chicken, and they opted for peanut butter sandwiches, which was not on the table.
I love the fact that the kids did their best to keep a straight face during the dinner table incident. I love that they really attempted to make him out to be not what he is while he wrestles. But you know what? He's just tired. That's all it is. He was just tired that day, and he was ready for everybody to go.
Definitely.
Get your stuff up. Just get out, okay? Just get out. I'm tired of everything.
Tired of everything.
He's ready to go. That's all it was.
He's ready to go. And eventually, instead of being tired, he also got sick and tired.
Get out. Yeah, y'all get on out of here. What's wrong with you? You crazy? Come out here and try to make a fool out of me. Don't ever come back. I'm sick and tired of everybody and everything.
That was our ending to David Schultz. But look forward to seeing him in future episodes. He'll definitely be a star. He has that charisma factor, even though I'm not sure if he was going for the one that he gets over on. He definitely will be at a soundboard near you and coming up in future episodes.
Let's get Bosley to see if he can find the interview where they went to Stone Cold Steve Austin's house.
Okay.
Put it side by side to Dr. D's when they went to his house interview. I think they told the camera crew to go away in about the same manner.
We'll definitely get that on there. Get Bosley to look into it for us.
Having put it on our Facebook, facebook.com/The Tag Team Podcast.
He's going to be a busy guy for someone that gets paid as much as he does. He's basically deserves to earn his pay.
Nobody can't say that Bosley doesn't have passion.
He is a man that is very passionate about his job. From after that interview, they go in and they set up Tito Santana, but first Tito must discuss what he just saw at Dr. D's house. Tito is not like that, letting him know that I'm not like that guy, and it appalls me to see that.
Yes, he definitely wipes his feet. And I believe our co-host, Lord Alfred, takes a couple shots at that David Schultz talks funny.
Yep, Lord Alfred does. He says he talks in a funny accent, and Vince comments that he thinks it's funny that he thinks he talks in a funny accent, because Lord Alfred also has a little bit of an accent, much like Lord Bosley.
Just a little bit.
I think they might be neighbors. I'll have to ask Bosley on that next time.
Definitely do. But back to the Tito Santana's, I believe it was his Make-A-Wish Foundation?
Yeah, something of the nature. They're calling it the Lunch with Your Favorite Wrestler. It's an ongoing contest. So if you guys would like to enter this contest, I'm sure it's still going on, because I don't think I ever saw another episode with it in there. But who knows? Maybe they'll surprise us. Episode 47. Maybe they'll go back to the Lunch with Your Favorite Wrestler. And Vince says they got some great videotape of this. If you'd like to kind of describe for the listeners the great videotape that they show on this episode of Tuesday Night Titans.
It was video like I've never seen.
That's one way to describe it.
It reminded me of a PowerPoint presentation.
That's
kids going out to eat. I believe they were at the Hilton Hotel, if I'm not mistaken.
Which, when surveyed, 9 out of 10 kids prefer eating at the Hilton instead of any kind of fancy fast food restaurant or any place where they can get pizza. Kids love to eat at Hiltons.
Yep.
Everyone knows that.
Definitely. They also had him holding his championship title.
Or did he win it?
Ooh.
Maybe that match just wasn't shown.
Maybe so. I know his friends was jealous jealous, though, when he popped by in that limo to go pick him up from school. I think, touching back on your point, the Hilton, I think all of his friends were at the Hilton waiting on him with the parents versus the pizza joint, definitely.
Crazy, they just had still shots of, here's Tito picking up the kid, here's the limo ride, here's a picture of the Hilton, and him eating with an executive producer, Tito Santana, and a kid. And the kid's name, as Vince likes to point out with our other count for the night, is Chris Beavers. And Vince makes sure that he says Chris Beavers every time he talks about the kid. That count was second to the concurred count. Came in with 4, but giving the amount of impact in such amount of time that they talked about this little segment, I would say Chris Beavers probably could have took on the concur count if it had a time limit.
I concur with that statement. I think that Vince was under contract to make sure that Chris Beavers was mentioned.
Fortunately, we couldn't find any information Bosley couldn't on Chris Beavers, so if Chris Beavers, if you're out there, contact us. We'd love to hear about your lunch with Tito Santana. That happened 33 years ago. That'd be good times.
Yes, please contact us.
The next thing they like to show is a match with Tito, since they were just talking to him. So they showed Tito versus Adrian Adonis. Adrian Adonis is more known for his flamboyancy character that he did a little bit later than this. So this was the first time I've actually seen him where his hair wasn't blonde and he wasn't wearing makeup, dancing around, purple tights or anything like that. So this was kind of a shocker for me. This was also the match that we were talking about that had a time limit, though the title was on the line, but the time expired. So neither party actually won. It went to a draw, or as they like to call in business, went to Broadway, where neither opponent actually wins, and it ends at time expiring. Definitely something you don't see that often. Usually they don't do time limit matches nowadays unless they're advertising in advance that it's going to be for 60 minutes in an Iron Man match or an Iron Woman match.
At the end of the match, that Mr. Santana introduced Mr. Adonis to the bell.
Yes, he did. His bell meant face and face meant bell. But that was pretty hardcore for back then. They didn't use too many foreign objects in matches like they do nowadays as often.
But they did manage to instant replay him slamming his head into the bell. I was very entertained.
It was pretty entertaining. You had Mean Gene again and Vince on commentary. I don't know if that was the A-House team show or if this just all happened on a one road trip or whatever. On one match, it looked like they had a fancy made-for-TV USA 4th of July table set up with the fancy little USA banner, red, white, and blue thing that you usually saw back in the 80s a lot when they were advertising voting booth or something of that nature, some kind of patriotic sign-up thing. And then another match later on, they showed the table and it had an actual WWF logo on it, so it looked a little bit more professional. So I'm not really sure how they decided what made it to air and what didn't. I guess they probably just watched the match and decided if it was worthy of putting on TV or not and didn't really think about it ahead of time. Else I would think they'd try to be consistent with what the tables look like and stuff like that.
I think the voting table that you've seen was the entries for the lunch with your favorite wrestler.
Possibly might have been. That might have been where they were signing up kids or adults to have lunch with their favorite wrestler, and they might still be down there today signing up people. I don't know. I'm not sure.
I smell a field trip.
There you go. So the next segment they did, and very comical, was a mailbag. Keep in mind this was the first show that ever showed for Tuesday Night Titans, and somehow they had viewer mail for Tuesday Night Titans. That would kind of be like us having mail for this podcast. So if you'd like to go ahead and check the mail out there, Jeff, see if we got anything going.
Definitely. Let me see what we got here. Bosley. Nope, got nothing.
Okay, I guess they are definitely a more popular first-time airing show than we are then. First question they read was for Vince and wanted to know if he was a wrestler, and he chuckled and said, not big enough, not bad enough. That gave a chance for Vince to talk about him wanting to be a wrestler in a way, but just saying that he just did it a little bit in college, but wasn't big enough or bad enough for the professionals.
Kind of helped feed his ego a little bit.
Yeah, exactly, but whatever. Second question, Lord Alfred Hayes tries to read, and then they think it's too risque to read, so they never finish it. The third one had Tuesday Night Titans. They asked about the Road Warriors, not mention them by name, but saying other wrestlers that wear paint are on other promotions promotions. Do you think you will ever have wrestlers in your promotion that wear paint? And Vince said maybe. And they also wanted to know if it was legal for people to wear paint when they wrestled. Didn't sound like they knew too much about wrestling.
Or it could be one of the famously painted wrestlers dropping some hints at Vince McMahon since he was buying up the competition anyway.
Could possibly be. I want to say, I'm not 100% on this, I want to say Demolition was Vince's answer to the Road Warriors, so I'm not sure that Road Warriors actually came in before Vince just went with Demolition. He might have offered him some money or something, they just might have turned him down, but it seems like to me the first ones that came in wearing paint were the Demolition, and that was kind of Vince's answer to the Road Warriors. And after this, they go to an archive match, and while all these have been taped before, this was a super old one. You could tell by the film quality. It was probably from the 70s or possibly late 60s. It was Joe Turcato versus Arnold. Do you want to try to pronounce that last name?
I do not.
Okay. It was versus Arnold, somebody. It was basically the manager from Bob Backlund's days when he was wrestling. We'll go with Skalland. It's Skaa and then Land, so we'll go with Skalland. In this match, Arnold Skalland wins. They kind of make fun of the wrestlers a little bit. I guess it's their version of doing what we're doing here, except they're doing it on stuff that was earlier. And they had people smoking at one point. Vince comics with a joke saying that that smoke wasn't coming from the wrestler's butt, but it was from a cigarette from someone smoking in the audience. Lord Alfred Hayes thought this was hysterical, and they go on from there, just talking a little bit about the wrestlers and what they thought of them back then. Before this finished out and went to commercial, they kind of noticed that there was a stench in the studio. Weren't quite sure what that was, but there was a smell coming.
And we were rest assured it was not the same smoke that was in that match they had just seen.
The studio myself, I don't know if you noticed, didn't look that big. So if somebody was setting up, I don't know, say with a cooking show, exactly maybe 12 feet to my left, I think I would notice it. But I guess it's all fun and games.
Yes. I think they were wanting to know if you knew what The Rock was cooking.
Back before The Rock was cooking. It was some of his relatives. The Wild Samoans were up next. They show a match with them and Captain Lou. Title match. Taking on the great Tony Atlas and the Rock's dad for the tag team titles. Commentary was Vince McMahon, and I didn't really catch the other person. Couldn't make out their voice, so I'm not really sure if it was maybe Bruno Sammartino. Not sure if he was with the company at this point still or not, but it didn't sound like Mean Gene, nor did it sound like Gorilla Monsoon or any of the other ones from clips that they played, so I'm not really sure who was on commentary. The match ends when Captain Lou, no disqualification match, comes in with a wooden chair before they had steel chairs and smashes it over the Wild Samoan's head, and Rocky and Tony Atlas take advantage of that and get the 1, 2, 3, and they're your new tag team champs.
And I believe after that they got back to the studio with Captain Lou, and he was quoted to say that basically it was not his fault that he smashed a chair over one of the Wild Samoans' heads, that they should have been tough enough to work through it, and that's why they're not tag team champions.
But you forgot that when they first came back, he was with the Samoans, and he wouldn't say nothing. He wasn't saying nothing. He just kind of, and then after the Samoans left, Captain Lou goes, all heel, and he's like, their fault. They should have been able to work through it. Not my fault. So they go to commercial after that, and they do a Captain Lou montage of all the tag teams he's managed. Some of these I remember, some of these I've heard of, like the Moondogs. I've heard of them. I've never actually seen a match of them. The Assassins I've heard of, never actually seen any matches of them. So it was a montage of all the teams that he managed to show how many teams he's managed to success and stuff like that. Comes back to Captain Lou being a little boasting about his accomplishments, name dropping Cyndi Lauper, which he was just in her video at the time on MTV, so that was kind of a big deal for the promotion. After that, they go to commercial and come back to the cooking segment with the Wild Samoans. They have the great cooking segment. They have fish heads, tails. Basically, to me, I don't think you felt this way, but to me it looked like the fish was alive. I could have swore I saw it actually breathing before they cut into it.
I didn't see the fish breathing. I thought his thumb was making the gill actually flex out. In the end, I didn't see too much of the movement of the fish. My attention mainly was on Lord Alfred putting index finger and thumb over the nose very dramatically, and Vince McMahon conning him into sampling some of the awesome boiled fish head and lobster.
Yeah, while they were doing that, they also had the Wild Samoans as they were cutting into this fish, they actually were eating into some of the guts and stuff like that after they took them out. Basically, the point they were trying to drive home is the Samoans cook with parts that most people never eat, like the head and the tail, and they just put that in the stew and get rid of everything else. So that was what they were trying to drive home, besides the odor and things like that. They then go to a talk show, aired originally on public access station in Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania. It too is up there on YouTube. It runs about 52 minutes. Clip they show on their show, it picks up at about the 33-minute mark. It was an interesting show. I mean, it was sort of like daytime television, pretty much. You have your host that takes questions from the audience and they let the panel talk and stuff like that. She turns it over to Vince pretty soon, so she's not doing too much talking or interviewing whatsoever. She lets Vince do all of her dirty work. Basically, the heel characters stay in heel for most of it. A couple of times they break character and will answer the questions as far as a real answer would go and not what a heel wrestler would say for their answer. That was kind of interesting. Like I said, it runs about 52 minutes. It is out there on YouTube. We'll get Bosley to throw that one up there for you guys too if anyone wants to watch it and see the full episode versus the clip that they showed. The show is called It's Your Turn, Lehigh Valley. It's just a show that ran a lot during Pennsylvania's public access station, and this so happened to be a run focusing on professional wrestling. So it was interesting to watch just to see the contrast and how the wrestlers acted throughout the whole show.
I think Jerry Springer seen that. Thought, I can work with this.
It's possible that this could have inspired Springer to get started. Daytime television.
I firmly believe that.
I concur. The next thing that they had out there was just real random fast matches. They did Andre the Giant versus 3 no-name guys, and they had Vince McMahon and Gorilla Monsoon on commentary. I think they just basically wanted to show the wrestlers off to people that might have been tuning into the show for the first time to see what wrestlers were in WWF and just kind of throw their names out there so that people are more familiar with them. I was actually able to find this match on YouTube. It's part of the old video VHS Coliseums. So if you really want to see this match from start to end, you can put it out there on YouTube. Andre the Giant Home Coliseum video that they came out. This match was on there and it's from start finish. After that, they did Hulk Hogan versus Masked Superstar. Showed a quick clip of him, and that had Vince McMahon and Mean Gene on commentary. Then they jumped to the now depassed Superfly Jimmy Snuka versus Greg Valentine, and they did a clip on him with Gorilla Monsoon and Mean Gene on commentary this time. And then last they showed the aforementioned Iron Sheik versus 2 jobbers that they never gave any names for that I caught, and it was Vince McMahon and Mean Gene on commentary for that. And then after that they go on their 2-week hiatus, and this show is about 2 hours long, I imagine, with commercials, and it seems like the other shows are a lot shorter deal where we'll show a 2 hour, we'll go from there off of regular episodes of an hour or whatnot. But I found that a little bit interesting too, that the time frame changed as the episodes progressed.
I concur. But one thing I would have liked to see is the actual commercials from back in the day that they would have going in between.
Even the YouTube, it was taken from the WWE 24/7 days on demand before they came out with the network, and only certain cable companies covered the on demand. So while the quality is still top notch, you won't see any commercials or anything like that. It's basically the same thing you get on the network. I didn't notice any difference between any of the segments or anything like that.
Yeah, it's probably somebody with a sight ripper dragging it down.
Curious as to why they put that one and not all of them, but I can see you tempting fate the more stuff you put out there. It wouldn't surprise me if it gets taken down after our podcast is out there. I'm not saying that we're going to promote the heck out of it, that everybody's watching it, but as it gets more views than it's been getting probably the last couple of years, I think it was put out there in 2014, might draw some flags and attention.
Sorry guys, facebook.com/the Tag Team Podcast. We got you covered.
Alright, so that was the first episode of Tuesday Night Titans. Let's play a game, Jeff.
Yes.
Let's see how well you know your wrestlers of 1984. If you know if they're alive or today or not.
Alright, let's do it.
You're in for a blinding treat. It's time to play.
So in full disclosure, I helped Bosley research these, so I will not be playing because I already know the answers, but I'll let you know what I thought. So our first wrestler that we're going over is the first one from this episode that we were introduced to, Brian Blair. Do you think Mr. Brian Blair is still kicking?
No, I'm going to say he's passed away.
I I knew this one because I recently got a book from him, even though the book was from 96, and it teaches you how to speak Carney or to learn some of the Carney lingo that they used to use back in the day. So I was 100% certain that Brian Blair was alive.
Let's begin. Wrestler Brian Blair. Brian Leslie Blair is alive. He is 59 and currently a politician in Gary, Indiana. Brian has a wife and 2 kids.
So for all you out there that thought Brian Blair was dead, he is probably your local politician if you live in Gary, Indiana. Couldn't really find out what he was politically involved in, but he's doing some stuff. And recently, side note, Undercover Boss actually had an episode with the mayor of Gary, Indiana. So I can for certain say that Brian Blair is not the mayor of Indiana because this was a African-American female. Next wrestler, going in order of appearance for this episode, is Paul Orndorff. Is Paul Orndorff still alive?
Yes, Mr. Orndorff.
Wrestler Paul Orndorff. Paul Pilot Orndorff is alive. Mr. Wonderful is 67. After retiring, Orndorff worked as a professional wrestling trainer. In 2011, Orndorff was diagnosed with cancer, but went through treatment and was declared cancer-free by the end of 2011. Paul has a wife, 2 kids, and 8 grandchildren.
He was almost dead, but yes, you were right. He is now alive and still kicking.
I remember him being in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. Next in order of appearance is Charismatic, the star of episode 1, not the Olympic wrestler, Dr. D, David Schultz. Do you think David Schultz is alive or dead?
Well, Mr. Schultz. Evil never dies, so I'll say he's alive.
Now, on this one, I would have thought he was dead, but I was wrong, as I learned from Bosley, and let's Bosley tell you why.
Wrestler Dr. D, David Schultz. David Schultz is alive, though his wrestling career died long ago. Ha ha. David Schultz is 61. Schultz continued wrestling for a time after the 2020 incident, returning to Memphis and competing internationally in Japan and Canada, but his continued career was short-lived and he retired from professional wrestling soon after. Dr. D moved to Connecticut, where he opened a successful bail bonds business and began a second career as a professional bounty hunter. Pursuing criminals as far as Egypt and Puerto Rico, he has arrested around 1,700 fugitives and worked with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and various police departments for over 15 years. Schultz is married with no kids.
Dr. D, Bounty Hunter, I would watch that.
I knew that fits him to the T. I figured he would be chasing somebody. So, in his interview, who was the kids that he...
Probably some producer's kids. Could be that actual woman's kids, as I learned that he did not get married until later on in his career. So I'm pretty sure the wedding ring she was wearing and he was not wearing was probably to someone else.
I wonder if that was really his house.
I doubt it, but who knows. Next up, Adrian Adonis, another AWA alumni guy. Do you think Adrian Adonis is alive or dead?
Mr. Adonis, I believe he has passed away.
Let's see.
Wrestler Adrian Adonis. Keith A. Frank, better known as Adrian Adonis, is dead, passing away on July 4, 1988 in Canada at the age of 33. On July 4, 1988, in Lewisporty, Newfoundland, Adonis was in a minivan with 3 other fellow wrestlers. One of the wrestlers allegedly swerved to avoid hitting a moose. Blinded by the setting sun, their van fell from a bridge into a creek below. Adonis suffered severe head injuries and died a few hours later. The wrestler driving was the sole survivor and sustained severe leg injuries. At the time of his death, he left behind a wife and 2 young daughters in Bakersfield, California.
So yes, that is probably the most traumatic death that we'll have on this one. Typical Canadian fashion, he died avoiding hitting a moose.
Fell off the bridge onto a creek. Whew.
Yeah, on July 4th, but seeing how up in Canada, it wasn't a holiday there.
True. Very, very true.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird way to go, but yes, he is dead, and I kind of thought he was dead too before I did my research on this. I just really hadn't heard anything about him recently. I didn't know when he died or how he died, but he is no longer with us as of 88, so he don't go on to live about 4 more years after this episode. Kind of sad.
Yep.
So next on the list, Tito Santana. Do you think Tito Santana is alive or dead?
I believe he is still alive.
Bosley?
Wrestler Tito Santana, mercilessly better known by the ring name Tito Santana, is alive. El Matador is 63 and currently a Spanish teacher and basketball coach at Eisenhower Middle School in Roxbury Township, New Jersey. He also teaches wrestling classes at the New Jersey-based Independent Wrestling Federation. Tito has a wife and 3 kids.
Well, Matador is still kicking. You're correct, sir.
Anybody that does lunch with your favorite wrestler and takes the kid to the Hilton, you know he's going to make it.
No word if he is still everyone's favorite wrestler and still is obligated to do all those lunches. Next up, the aforementioned Arnold Scalland.
Oh, I'm sure he's passed.
Yeah, it's kind of a giveaway when you're watching a match from probably 69, 70s. He's probably no longer with us. Let's go with the inevitable. And Bosley, when did this guy pass?
Wrestler Arnold Scalland. Arnold Scalland is dead. Died on March 13, 2007 at the age of 82. He was married and had 3 sons.
So he made it to 2003. That lasts a pretty good time for a man of his generation.
Oh yeah, most definitely. 'Cause it was a lot worse back then than it is now, as far as the wrestling and hell that they put each other through off the camera.
Yeah, and just trying to make it out to the ring. And fans will put you through hell too if they didn't like you. I think he was mostly a face, but I'm not 100% on that. Next up is the greatest manager of all time. If you don't believe him, just ask him. Captain Lou Albano. Is Captain Lou still with us?
I would say he is probably dead.
Bosley.
Captain Lou Albano. Louis Vincent, better known as Captain Lou, is dead. Passing away October 14, 2009 at the age of 76. His death was caused by a massive heart attack while residing in hospice care for the past few months. Albano was survived by his wife, 4 children and 14 grandchildren.
Captain Lou Albano has passed.
Hmm.
So far, you're doing pretty good, man. You only missed Brian Blair.
Pretty proud of myself.
Yeah, not bad at all for a first-time viewer of Tuesday Night Titans. Next up, we're just going with 2 guys, so they're either both going to be dead or both be alive. The Wild Samoans. Are they dead or are they alive?
The Wild Samoans. Samoans are pretty tough. Probably some of the toughest people that you'll ever meet. Either they're both going to be dead or both going to be alive. Let's just say they're alive barely.
Okay, I'll go with that. Bosley?
Tag team the Wild Samoans. Wrestlers are Fansika. Both Wild Samoans are alive. Arthur Afanoi is 74. After leaving the WWF, he began training wrestlers at his Wild Samoan training facility, along with Sika. Liti Sika Anoi is 71, has 3 daughters and 2 sons, Matt and Liti Joseph. Matt is a professional wrestler, who briefly wrestled in WWE under the name Rosie. Liti Joseph, known as Joe, played college football for Georgia Tech from 2003 to 2006. He began a wrestling career in 2010, working for WWE under the ring name Roman Reigns.
So a little modern history there mixed in with past history.
Yeah.
Samoan offspring Reigns, and maybe soon after the Samoans will have death threats.
Maybe.
Some people don't like Roman Reigns. So overall, you only missed 1, man. Good job.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks for playing, old chaps, and tune in next time for another round of
Was our game of Dead and Alive. Hopefully you guys scored as well, or maybe you even trumped Jeff and got them all right.
Not likely.
That's going to be hard to do.
It's true.
With that being said, that was our first episode, the inaugural episode of the Tag Team Podcast. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If not, still rate us high anyway. We appreciate that. Don't tell anyone that you didn't like it. Tell your friends. Tell your friends' friends. Tell your family's friends. Tell your friends of your family. Download on many devices. They have no way of knowing if you're the same person. As long as that IP address is different, it counts as a different device, and that helps with our rankings. Next week, we're going to go over Roddy Piper in episode 2. He's going to clash with Ivan Putski, Mr. Fu. Fuji is going to give us a lesson in traditional Japanese customs. Plus, Big John Studd's going to be on there, and many more wrestlers. Jeff's already done a little bit of a sneak preview where I've yet to watch episode 2. And first impressions of what you've seen so far, what you think of episode 2?
I have to say, I was a little creeped out. A little comic relief there. Mr. Fuji kind of took me on a little ride that I didn't really know what to say. Let's just say thank God for Paul Orndorff. He's GM. He's a very motivated person in the gym. I would love to work out with him someday.
Could be because of the wellness policy, but we're not sure. Well, thanks everyone for listening. We appreciate it, and hopefully you'll tune in next week when we cover episode 2 of WWF Tuesday Night Titans.
Follow us on social media. On Facebook, facebook.com/The Tag Team Podcast. On Twitter, @Tag Team. On Google+, Tag Team Podcast. Or email us at thetagteampodcast@gmail.com. Or on the tagline, leave us a voicemail. 6016544 that's 60165448824.
Thank you for listening to the Tag Team Podcast. Join Jeff and John next week as they continue to break down WWF Tuesday Night Titans.
I'm still looking for a man. I don't care how big you are, how tall you are, how small you are, how weak you are. I don't care what kind of language you speak. I don't care where you come from. I don't care what color your skin is.